Good morning, Will.
Good morning, Rich. How you doing, my brother?
Good. What flavor of Bang are you enjoying this morning?
Black cherry vanilla, but yesterday I had a blue raz.
A blue Raz. That's what I'm
I'd
talking about.
love to tell you how it tasted, but I had the virus about 5 months ago, and I still can't taste anything.
Is that right?
Yeah, it's really weird because if I eat something spicy, my tongue burns, my nose runs, don't taste a thing.
Wow. Wonder what
Yeah,
the long
so
the long term implication of that is still a little spooky to me.
yeah. There's nothing else wrong with me,
Good morning and welcome to Emerging Threats Monday. This is a show for the American Warrior Show, the podcast of the American Warrior Society. My name is Rich Brown, co-host, co-founder of the American Warrior Society, American Warrior Show, retired Marine Corps officer, former police officer, corrections officer, special operations officer, regional manager for disaster preparedness. Man, I've done a little bit of
done it
everything.
all, man.
Done it all, brother. And
Yeah,
I'm joined
you're
by
the man.
I'm joined by none other than Will Wood, voted sexiest airline captain 6 years running by Crack Magazine. Will, please say good morning.
Good morning, everyone. Will Wood, your friendly neighborhood self-defense economics news geek. Just happy to be here and help out how I can. Rich is showing off that coin there. If you need a coin, you do need a coin. There you go, brother. You got it. Now it's right side up. Join the American Warrior Society. Become a coin member. All kinds of crazy stuff in the vault. Awesome, good stuff. There's a master's degree in self-defense in there.
Yeah, a master's degree in ass kickery.
Yes.
You know, another thing that people don't know about Will Wood is that his poop is currency in Argentina. That's actually a fact there. I once saw him. Little known fact. I once saw Will breastfeed an injured flamingo back to health. True story, folks.
Oh, that coffee must have a little something extra in it this morning, there, brother.
Yeah. Johnny King is on. It says, good morning from Kentucky. My brother Jeff Brown is down there in Key West.
I got chilly down there, didn't
Yeah,
it?
chilly,
Yeah,
bro.
I saw you had some pictures of ice on sailboats in Key West.
Yeah. James Knowlton is on. Good morning, brother. He's out there in Las Vegas. Dr. Fuller is on. Guy in the Philippines. Jesse, Bob, coin number 26. Hey, we got a damn good show for you. I don't mind saying so myself. Will and I are going to talk through some of the things that Scott says. Good morning, boys from Lansing, Michigan. Good morning, Scott. Like and hit that share button, man. Will and I, this is Emerging Threats Monday, and today we're going to talk about Ukraine, kind of how we got here, where we're going, kind of look at this from many different angles and keep you guys abreast because you have everything right. Well, you have people saying this is what you do about nothing. This is a European problem. And then you have, this is Armageddon, right?
Yeah. And, as interconnected as the world is, we talked about the supply chain thing, gosh, a few months ago now. Man, anything big that affects anything in the world will affect you in some way.
That's absolutely correct, man. So I'm going to give a quick sponsor read. Thank you to all of our amazing sponsors here at the American Warrior Show. Mr. Seekland and I are incredibly blessed to have people like Century Martial Arts, makers of the Bob XL Body Opponent Bag. If you need a strike dummy, if you need a shooting partner, Bob is a great three-dimensional target. He'll eat that 5.56 like it's candy. He don't mind. Please check out the Bob XL. Also, check out apphemp.com. That's Appalachian Standard. Jesse and I were in the Marines together. Jesse's a retired gunnery sergeant. Him and his family are growing some amazing CBD products in the beautiful mountains of Asheville, North Carolina. We also have the Cool Fire Trainer. Why dry fire when you can cool fire, man? All you got to do is take your gun, your barrel, you replace your barrel and your recoil spring, and you get felt recoil. What's amazing is it's your sights. It's your trigger. You're going to get felt recoil. Please check out Cool Fire Trainer. Mountain Man Medical, man. Life-saving is much more cool than life-taking, guys. Get everything you need for your trauma kit or your IFAC kit. All your needs can be met, even training over at Mountain Man Medical. Last but not least, precision holsters. As always, I'm wearing my Ultra Appendix rig with my G26 in there. Please check out everything that Precision Holsters has to offer by following the links in today's show notes. Thank you to the 21 people that are joining us so far, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Glad to see everybody got up early.
Well, this show is going to be good, and I'll jump right into it, Will, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, man, have at it. We got a lot to cover. You put together a heck of a show here.
Yeah, so for those of you that don't know, Will and I kind of like, I'll take the lead one week and we'll take the lead next week. Will is going to take the lead next week. You want to talk to him about what's next week's
Sure.
show is going to
Next
be?
week, after we get through this, I'm going to do kind of a connecting the dots show because I've started noticing more and more things come together between China and what they're doing with Taiwan, Russia, supply chains. Kind of bring a lot of this together, along with all the shows we did on inflation and monetary policy and fiscal policy, and how all this could tie together to become a heck of a storm.
Yeah, so today's show, for those of you that don't know much about what's going on in Ukraine, the disparate pieces of information, trying to pull it all together to make a cohesive whole is incredibly difficult because, like we said today, every major news outlet has their own agenda and their own spin. Tucker Carlson, who I like, is kind of laughing this away, and I think there are broader implications here, and we really can't take our eye off of it.
Yep.
One of the things that really kind of peeved me off a little bit about this whole thing was I read a article, and all today's show notes are in the links today. I've got probably at least a dozen or two references to everything that I'm going to be quoting and talking about here. But CNN said, quote, if Russia invades Ukraine, inflation-weary Americans will likely pay even higher prices at the pump, end quote. And I'm like, are you freaking kidding me? This is all you got to say? Higher prices at the pump? And that's I think what's wrong with our Western media, man, or the West in general, Will, is the short-sightedness, man.
Yes.
We don't think long-term.
Yeah. It's how's it affect me right now? Yeah. It's really annoying. When I read that in your show notes, it got to me too, because there's be a lot of human suffering over there, and they're worried about paying an extra whatever at the gas pump.
Well, even if you say, I don't really care about Ukrainians, I'm worried about me. Well, we got plenty to worry about me if they do invade. So and then Senator Marco Rubio out of Florida said this, quote, if Putin is able to move into Ukraine, take on a few sanctions and some international condemnation, but ultimately not pay a terrible price, it doesn't just impact Ukraine. It becomes the model that China, Iran, North Korea, and other rogue governments around the world will follow. So I would say, which is it? A few extra pennies at the pump or a new dark age of global authoritarian aggression? Where is the truth, Will? What do you think?
I think the truth is by doing this, Putin's pulling a lot of levers. He needs oil prices higher. It lets him project power. It lets him put a ton of pressure on Europe. It lets him get NATO divided because Germany isn't jumping in here and helping because they need the Russian gas. So he's creating fissures inside of NATO as well.
Yes, he is. And definitely we're going to talk about Germany and their relationship or their addiction, I should say, to Russian fossil fuels, because that is playing into it big time. TC says long-term in the U.S. is a 4-year election cycle, which again limits our ability to see any further than that in a lot of ways.
For sure.
Alan Kelly has a quick question. Says, was Ukraine during World War II what Hitler wanted to do to natural resources? Yeah, lots of resources there, and we're going to talk about some of the history behind this. I don't want to get into a lot of it because you can really bog yourself down in well, the Vikings came into what is now the Ukraine, and they settled in the city of Kiev, and that really kind of was the foundation of the Russian state. And I think you can really bog down in that. But let's go back to the beginning of the current crisis. So on December the 17th, Russia delivered what they titled, quote, Treaty between the United States of America and the Russian Federation on Security Guarantees. That's pretty innocuous.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to go into it. It's an 8-part, there's 8 articles to it. And it starts out with several hundred pages of just kind of prepping the battle space. And then it goes into these 8 demands. And the first couple are pretty, they make sense. But I think it's articles 3 through 8 is where it gets a little bit, where it positions it in a way that America could never meet those demands. And I think this is one of the things that Putin planned on. It's a maximal position paper. This is,
sure.
I want everything and I'm going to put it out there. And then if I get 3 or 4 of them, I'll consider that a win. But
yeah,
I think it was designed probably to start a very aggressive dialogue but it didn't just come out of nowhere. He's got over 100,000 troops massed on the border. So it's not so much here's a position paper on a potential treaty for us.
Mm-hmm.
It's more of a list of demands, right?
Yep, absolutely. And it's negotiating 101, right? Ask for way more than what you want and then settle for a little more than you even wanted in the first place.
Yeah, yeah. Dr. Fuller says, hey, wait a minute. Germany is helping. They're sending 5,000 helmets and they're setting up a mobile hospital. So somebody said they're probably going to charge them for those helmets. But
yeah, probably.
Bob says if it's those pointy Kaiser helmets, then at least they'll look awesome.
Bob and I are on the same page because I had the exact same thought.
Yeah, that would look rad.
Yeah.
I think the only thing missing from the Russian treaty, if we want to call it that, was the final phrase "or else," because if they didn't meet here's the bottom line. On January the 26th, NATO, because NATO got one of these as well. There was one addressed to America and one addressed to NATO, and they both were pretty much the same thing. And on Wednesday, the 26th of January, the United States came back to Russia, said, okay, we reject everything you said, but how about this list instead? As a way to give Putin an off-ramp, and so he did not have to invade. But the core demands were still unmet, and Russia's core demands are deny Ukraine entry into NATO and cut military ties with Ukraine and other parts of the former Soviet Union. That's really what they wanted.
Right, absolutely.
And that's what they're never going to get, probably.
And again, it goes back to Putin wants that buffer. He's trying to get the band back together. He wants that buffer between the NATO countries in Europe and the Russian homeland.
Yes, exactly. Dr. Fuller says the Vikings, geez, there's another potential problem right now. We're missing a Duke of Sussex, York, and Edinburgh. Yeah. TC and I were talking about this the other day. How are we going to move forward if we don't have these Dukes in place?
We're done.
It's an end of day scenario.
Yeah.
I see Mr. Bob Bale says the U.S. has called a meeting of the Security Council today at the United Nations, so I'm sure it will be all cleared up by this afternoon.
Oh, okay. Well, we're done.
Yeah, all right. Let's go ahead and shut it down. That ain't going to happen.
No. But Jesse brings up a good point there. All the moves show that Putin is a brilliant tactician. I honestly don't know what kind of tactician he is. He's obviously way better than somebody we got here in the U.S. right now. But it's the same for China with Xi Jinping. It's a lot easier to be a great tactician when you don't have to worry about an election cycle or polls or anything else. So, yeah, I mean, it's the give and take. But because the American people can't see past, the next news cycle, it's hard for any president, I don't care what party, to be a tactician.
Yeah. Tony says, will the French send rifles never shot and only dropped once? Yeah, there's a lot of amateur comedians on today's show. I love it.
Yeah, I'm loving it.
Let's talk about the annexation of Crimea, because really this, going back to 2014, annexation of Crimea is a potential beginning for this conflict. And I say that because when the Ukrainian president on 22nd of February 2014 was deposed, it left America and Europe scrambling for what would be the adequate response to this. And because Putin was looking like he was going to invade, they're working through diplomatic channels. And within a week of, I can't pronounce his name, Yanukovych, him leaving office, Putin had already sent special operations troops, and they had seized strategic locations across Crimea. And while he was doing that, the regional authorities in Crimea declared, of course, they're Russian puppets, they declare independence from the Ukraine and vote to join Russia. And on March 17th, the Crimean parliament officially declared its independence and requested full annexation by the Russian Federation. And that ended 60 years of unity with the Ukraine. And on March the 19th, Russian soldiers stormed the Ukrainian military bases in Crimea. And by March the 29th, it was absolutely over. It's a wrap. The dust is settled and it's done. So you went from 22 Feb to 29 March, and it's a wrap.
Yep.
And this
and that just goes to show how well the Russians did prepping the battlefield, right?
That's exactly right. Yeah. So with that being said, I found it very interesting the other day. Celeste Wallander, who is Biden's pick as I believe, a deputy undersecretary of defense. Don't quote me on that. But she was somebody that worked in the Obama administration. And she was very critical of the Obama response to Crimea. And she even said, quote, "I believe that our response in 2014 was too slow and too incremental. And it's confirmed by the lessons that I've learned and that I believe others in the national security community learned to better address Russia's ongoing aggression," end quote. And so I think that there's a lesson to be learned here. If Russia has the ability to quickly and surgically do this, and I think Putin even said, "Hey, man, we did this annexation without even firing a shot." I don't think that's going to happen in Ukraine.
No, I don't think so. There's a lot of, if anybody wants to do a quick search on YouTube or use the Google, a lot there. Obviously, the Ukrainian military is getting ready, but there's a lot of militia groups over there, private citizens training up. Kind of makes a case for the Second Amendment.
Oh, absolutely makes a case for the Second Amendment. Yeah. Wallander goes on to say, "I believe one of the lessons I learned is that it would have been appropriate and necessary to provide Ukraine with what it needed to defend its territory, including weapons that you suggest," because Senator Tom Cotton made a point that, hey, look, Trump sent weapons over there and we still haven't had World War III yet. Mm-hmm. And of course, Tom Cotton being a Republican. "The Biden administration has threatened, if Russian President Vladimir Putin invades Ukraine, to levy stiff sanctions," whatever that means, and we'll talk about what that might mean, "reinforce NATO's eastern flank, and further arm the Ukraine beyond the $450 million the U.S. sent last year in military aid." And of course, this is lethal aid, guys. This is not helmets in a hospital. This is Javelin missiles, et cetera. And we can talk about what those are here in just a moment. But what's interesting about this, Will, is there's been a bipartisan call from lawmakers who feel the administration needs to take a more muscular approach to deter Putin. And I'm going to give you an example where we're going to talk about midterm elections here, because I think this is one of those things that people aren't seeing, and hopefully we'll connect some of the dots here. But I wanted to get a quote here from Senator Richard Blumenthal, an absolute dove, Democrat from Connecticut. Although he did serve in the Marine Corps, Senator Blumenthal did. He did it because he had run out of draft deferments. I believe he had
any organization's got to let a couple slip through the cracks, I suppose.
He had, I think, 5 draft deferments. Don't quote me on that's 4 or 5 draft deferments. And finally, he was able to join the Marine Corps Reserve because that would virtually assure that he would not go to Vietnam. He actually went around telling people he did go to Vietnam, which is a lie. And he had to finally eat that. But here's a quote from this dove up there in Connecticut. He says, quote, "I assume," he's talking to Wallander, right? "I assume you want to do more than just look at it, because time is not on our side here. I hope that you would urge as imminently as possible, even before your confirmation perhaps, that the United States take a more aggressive and strong action to bolster Ukrainian defenses with more radar systems, Javelin missiles, Stinger, and other anti-aircraft missiles and other capabilities. That will show Vladimir Putin we mean business, because in my view, that's the only sign he will respect other than strong economic sanctions," end quote. And here's a response from Wallander, who has a PhD from Yale and a former professor at the Harvard School of Government. Her reply was, quote, "I agree with you. Those are core requirements Ukraine needs in the face of the force that Russia has amassed," end quote. So here we have someone who was a professor at the Harvard School of Government, and her only thing is, we need to send them Javelin missiles to kill tanks. Yeah. It's like, okay.
Well, and we're going to touch on this next week when we talk about connecting the dots. But the economic sanctions, the power of those are slowly going away, because we're losing control of that worldwide, because the U.S. dollar is not used for all these transactions anymore.
Yeah, and we're definitely going to get into that today. Let's see. TC says she's brilliant. She's figured out that appeasement is a losing strategy. Someone should write that down.
Didn't Neville Chamberlain, shouldn't he have taught us that?
Oh, Neville Chamberlain. Yes, I have talked to Hitler, and I think we can trust this guy. My good friend Michael says, "Where is Lieutenant Colonel Vindman, the brilliant Ukrainian strategist and U.S. patriot on Biden's handling?" Yeah, no kidding. I hadn't even thought about that.
I hadn't either. Cue the crickets music, right?
Yeah, no doubt. So when we talk about military aid to the Ukraine, let's break that down. So far, we've seen I believe thus far this year, $200 million military aid package. The package, apart from 300 Javelin missiles. And what's interesting about the Javelin, relative to say the old Dragon anti-tank missile or the TOW anti-tank missile or some of the other ones, the Javelin kills top down, so it'll fire directly onto the target. It'll go sky high and then attack the armor from the top. It's a very very lethal piece of equipment here. Since 2014, the U.S. has supplied more than $2.7 billion in security assistance to the Ukraine, of which over $650 million was sent in 2021 alone to build the capacity of its forces. It has also given a go-ahead to Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania to send U.S.-made weapons to the Ukraine as well. And as we saw, we have all non-essential diplomats and their families have been pulled out of the area. That's the United States as well as most European partners. So there's a lot of things going down here.
Yep. And there was a security alert I got last week. I think I sent it over to you there, brother. When the State Department told everybody to get out of Ukraine, they went, use any conveyance possible. We will not guarantee your safety. Well, that just would make me feel warm and fuzzy right here next time they want to put me someplace overseas.
Yeah, same here, because, and that's a great segue into Afghanistan, because I saw the same thing there. And it's amazing, you know, prior to, I think, the estimated population of the Taliban in Afghanistan in 2021 was 75,000 people, 75,000 members of the Taliban. And if you go back a few years before, it was 60,000. So the ranks had been swelling for years. 75,000 Taliban were able to roll over the United States and our friends in just 10 days. I'm sorry, 5 days.
Yep.
And when our friends and enemies were watching this, they were stunned, because our U.S. intelligence had warned on August the 10th, it's going to take 30 to 90 days for the Afghani government to collapse. So they knew it was going to collapse, but they said, maybe 30 days, 90 days. It happened in 5 days.
Yep.
And the world was watching, and Putin was watching. And I believe there are probably still Americans that are there. Now, whether they're stuck there or whether they want to remain there is anyone's call. But, you know, these things have consequences, man.
Absolutely, they do. And not only did they roll over us that fast, Obama. Wow, talk about Freudian slip. Osama bin Laden called it decades ago. He said, we'll beat them the same way we beat the Russians. We'll just outlast them, wait for public opinion to turn against them.
And he was right.
Yep. It's the old saying, right? Americans have the watches, but the Afghanis have all the time.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And, you know, now they have an Air Force now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Now they have an Air Force. So there you go. And people are like, well, you know, it's been wrecked. Guys, they could hire somebody to fix that crap.
Yep.
I want to talk about tanks, because this is something I haven't heard anybody say, and I kind of tripped across this. But it's also, it's worthy talking about. From World War II on through the Cold War, tanker units were a heavy presence in Germany. Let me tell you, when we say a heavy presence, what are we talking about? At the peak, and Germany was home to 20 NATO armored divisions, 20 armored divisions. That means about 6,000 tanks. But on March the 18th, 2013, the last American armored brigade was deactivated, leaving 0 U.S. tanks in Europe. Let me say that again. At the end of August 2013, no American tanks were in Europe. And of course, Putin rolls right in and takes Crimea, because it's one of those things where tanks take a long time to get into theater. It's not something that, you know, you can drop the 82nd Airborne Division, but to get tanks and heavy armor to a theater is quite a logistical pull, especially when you're coming from halfway around the world. So the RAND, the think tank, the RAND group in 2020 did a study, and they said that the calculus has never changed. If you wanted to deter war and grow your influence in a region, you must base armored vehicles near the potential war zone. And then RAND went on to say, you must do this permanently. They can't leave, because there you go.
So the 2013, wasn't it Obama and Romney for the presidential race in 2012? Am I right on that?
Say that again.
Wasn't it Obama and Romney running against each other in 2012?
I believe so, but don't quote me on that.
I, assuming that's correct, but I know this next part's correct. Wasn't it Obama when Romney said Russia was our biggest threat? Didn't Obama say the 80s called they want their foreign policy back?
That sounds right. Yeah.
And then what, a year later, actually not even 3 months after inauguration in 2013, last armored division leaves, and where are we? Not even a decade later.
Exactly. And of course, after Putin invades Crimea, the Pentagon is scrambling to restore the strength in Europe. So now the Army temporarily deploys one armor brigade at a time in Europe, each on a 9-month rotation. So a typical armor brigade has about 90 M1 Abrams tanks and about 130 fighting vehicles, plus 18 self-propelled howitzers. So we do have some there, but again, is our 90 M1 Abrams going to do much? Because Russia in the same region has about 760 tanks within striking distance of NATO.
And
So
not only that, how much shorter is their supply line to get more tanks and troops and all the logistics to the front line of the fight?
precisely. And our 90 M1 Abrams tanks are augmented by about 40 European tanks. So you've got 130 tanks in the region up against 760. So in 2016, the RAND war game, the Russian invasion. And in that scenario, the Russian forces quickly overran the light armored NATO forces. The Western Alliance quickly deploys helicopters, but NATO tanks were too slow to arrive. And so here's what's interesting about this. So we talk about tanks. In 2021, the Polish conducted war games against the Western military districts of Russia. And guess what happened? It was dubbed Winter 20. Care to take a guess what happened in this war game?
I'm guessing it didn't turn out so good for the good guys.
It was a crushing defeat. They lost in a matter of days in this war game about 60 to 80%. So the initial plan envisioned a 22-day time frame for repelling the Russian assault, but by the 5th day, the Russian troops were already fighting for control of Warsaw, and it's a wrap. So on January the 8th of 2022, Poland's defense minister confirmed that Poland is buying 250 M1 Abrams tanks to replace their aging Russian T-72s. They're buying 250 tanks. So do you think Poland, of course, for those of you that weren't good in geography, Poland is just north of the Ukraine. Mm-hmm. They're taking this threat very seriously, man.
Yep. And Russia's prepping the battlefield there with Poland. They're flooding that border region with refugees, pushing them right up there, just sucking their resources down.
Yeah. Dr. Fuller says, but Rich, you're completely overlooking the fact that the French are right there in Europe.
And I heard they built a new Maginot line too. So yeah, it's all good.
Let's figure out how that works. Yeah, it'll work this time. You got to trust me on that. So let's talk about so tanks. I think was an interesting thing to realize. Wow, and in the 21st century, these giant armored machines are still this enormous deterrent. Number one, and everybody's scrambling to get them because it's the only thing that's might make the difference. So let's talk about NATO. Moscow said NATO's response to its demands did not go far enough. And again, you could call it a treaty or you can call it a demand. I think they're demands. Russia has forced the NATO and 57-member organization to negotiate over regional security by, of course, massing 100,000 troops near Ukraine while denying, I have no plans on invading. What are you talking about?
Nope, no plans at all.
And so the head of NATO, Stoltenberg, said, quote, "We have no plans to deploy NATO combat troops to the Ukraine. We are focusing on providing support," end quote. He went on to say, Mr. Will, there's a difference between being a NATO member and being a strong and highly valued partner as Ukraine. There's no doubt about that. So will NATO do anything? Right now they're saying we're not going to put combat troops in the region.
Boy, there's nothing like projecting weakness, huh?
Exactly. Alan says a Russian blitzkrieg. What's interesting about that is when I joined the military back in 1989, as many of you on here will remember, we were trained that we were going to be fighting the Soviets in the Volga Gap, that they were going to flood into Europe through this gap. because the Russian mechanized infantry and their armored divisions could quickly take Berlin, and then we're in a fight to the death over Europe. And of course, then it looks like, okay, well, this isn't going to happen. But I will tell you, the Ukraine is a perfect place for armor because it's just rolling plains for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll talk about the how the terrain plays into it. But first, before we do that, let's talk about the Nordstrom 2. The Nordstrom 2, Will, do you think most Americans know about the Nordstrom 2?
The Nord. Isn't that, I've got my VPN's Nord. Is that what that is?
No, but close.
Oh, okay. Same but different?
Same but different.
Okay.
So we're going to talk about the Nordstrom 2 as well as energy disarmament, which is an interesting idea. It's a beautiful play on words, energy disarmament. And I'll get to exactly what that means in just a moment. But what prompted me to think about this is Ned Price, who's a State Department spokesman. He was on NPR recently, and he said, quote, "I want to be very clear. If Russia invades Ukraine one way or another, the Nordstrom 2 will not move forward." And it made me think, what the hell is the Nordstrom 2? And then he went on to say, when he was pressed on the specifics, he said, "I'm not going to get into the specifics of how it's going to be stopped." So the question remains, can the United States cancel the Nordstrom 2, which is a giant pipeline connecting Russia to Germany? And it goes under the Baltic Sea. It's about 760-mile pipeline that runs right alongside the Nordstrom 1, which is a smaller gas pipeline. This is a giant gas pipeline that's going to more than double the output of gas to Germany. So Mr. Price said, when pressed further, he says, look, we're going to work with Germany to ensure that it does not move forward. So, but while he was insisting that it was going to stop the project completely, Germany only said it wouldn't rule out imposing sanctions on the project.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So here's my thing. So we're talking about energy disarmament, right? So we're looking at a multi-prong influence operation from Russia. So they spend decades building up their energy exporting capability to help them project power.
Mm-hmm.
And so this isn't a short game thing. And Germany is the economic engine of Europe.
Oh, yes, they are. If you take Germany out of the EU, that thing folds like a cheap suit, right? I mean, it's done.
Yep.
What's interesting about the Nordstrom 2 is, care to guess who the chairman of Nordstrom is?
No, I have no clue who that is.
I didn't have any clue either. He's the former German Chancellor, Schroeder.
Really?
So the former Chancellor of Germany, I think before Angela Merkel, this guy named Schroeder, he is now the chairman of Nordstrom, which is a Russian-owned, Swiss-based firm that owns the pipeline bringing gas to Europe. And of course, he's a longtime friend of our old buddy Vlad.
Mm-hmm.
And he went on to say, this is something funny that the former German chancellor, who's now the head of the Nordstrom, said, quote, "The saber rattling from the Ukraine will stop." So he's accusing the Ukraine of rattling the saber, which is bananas. In 2018, Wall Street Journal called Chancellor Schroeder, quote, "a luxury-loving, paid-up, swaggering instrument of Vladimir Putin," end quote. And
so, it kind of makes you wonder, because we see this here in the U.S., right? We see people popping from, J.P. Morgan and Hank Paulson, going from, it was J.P. Morgan for him, I believe, going from there to being Treasury Secretary and using those contacts. So now Schroeder is doing the same thing. You think he understands really, truly what Germany will and won't do with this, and is therefore advising Putin on that? The fox is in the hen house, brother.
Yeah. And my brother says Russia kept a small spot of land between Lithuania and Poland, giving them a hold in Northern Europe. Yes, they do. And I didn't mention that, but I think Jeff's point is incredibly well made. Let me back up here, because a lot of people don't understand that. It's called Kaliningrad. Kaliningrad is strategic because it is Russia's only year-long ice-free port in the Baltic. So it's definitely something that they're right there above Poland, and they got the Ukraine right below them. So Poland is kind of sandwiched in if Ukraine gets taken. Dr. Fuller has a good point here. I'm going to talk about this at the end of the show, because he's right. He says, sure, the Russians can take the land, but can they hold it for long? I mean, their economy is the size of South Korea, and their entire population is only 144 million. Do you need to catch that, Will?
No, that's my dog. Actually, we've got her trained to ring a doorbell.
Oh, cool. Look at that.
Yeah, yeah. So she just needs to go in or out. The bride will take care of it. Thanks.
Gotcha. Says their economies dwarf Russia's, add the rest of NATO, including the U.S., and it's quickly in 1944 again with nukes and the Chinese. Yeah, we're going to talk about that. Let's get to Gentili's point here. It says NATO, an organization of brie-eating, wine-sipping, wait till America saves our ass so we can criticize them group PC professionals.
Wow, that would make a heck of a business card right there.
Yes, it would. I love it. So I think the Ukrainian president, Zelensky, he previously described the Nord Stream 2 as a dangerous geopolitical weapon.
Mm-hmm.
Russia is, of course, the main EU supplier of crude oil, natural gas, and solid fuels. The dependency rate on energy imports has increased since 2000. Effectively, Germany and the EU has disarmed themselves and become dependent on Russian energy. Germany is among the world's biggest natural gas importers, and at around 94% of its gas consumption is met by imports. And of course, most of that's coming from Russia. Mm-hmm. So again, energy disarmament here is an interesting idea. When you stop producing your own energy and you become dependent on another country, then that country has you in a perpetual chokehold. Would you agree?
Absolutely. And what did we just do with fracking here not too long ago?
Yeah, exactly.
For the first time in forever, we were a net energy exporter a few years ago, and now we're back to being a net energy importer. And I'll guarantee you, my gut feels I don't care how high gas prices get, there's still gonna be people who say, no, don't use our own.
I tell you, I have said this since, December probably of 2001, and that was that we missed the boat. We should have, after 9/11, we should have saw the writing on the wall and become completely energy independent. Mm-hmm. To leave our energy needs up to another country is just, you're letting them hold a cocked gun to your head at all times. It's a non sequitur. Non sequitur for me, man.
And speaking about the gas and Nord and all that, I was just reading reports this last week. A lot of European countries are jetting all over the world trying to secure natural gas supplies from other countries, including the U.S. So this is another one of those connecting the dot things. The Nord, Russia sending natural gas to Germany, that won't affect us. Yeah, it could well affect your utility bill next month.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And again, that's just short term.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Let's talk about speaking of short term, this is a good segue. Let's talk about the midterms, man, because as we mentioned, Wallander's confirmation hearing, we're seeing doves become hawks, and we have to ask ourselves, why is people like Senator Blumenthal, as blue a guy can be, why is he saying we need to get aggressive? We need a more muscular response. We need to do something about this. Well, because 14 Senate seats.
I have a guess. Because it looks good in the campaign ad.
And he's running for re-election. Shocker.
Yep.
14 seats held by Democrats and 20 held by Republicans are up for re-election in 2022. All 435 U.S. House seats will be up for election. 42 representatives are not seeking re-election to the House, and that's 29 Democrats and 13 Republicans. And incumbents retiring from political office, 21 Democrats and 6 Republicans. So, and here again, they know how weak we looked in Afghanistan. They know what Biden's agenda has been so far, and I think a lot of them are going to be rattling the sabers to look tough here for their constituents. Or I could be wrong.
Yep. Oh, I think you're absolutely right. Bob brings up a great point. Article in The Economist talking about how we push supplying gas to Europe, so they wouldn't be dependent on Nord. Poland bought in; the others did not, and a lot of people don't know this, but the United States of America, we are how Saudi Arabia is for oil. The United States is for natural gas, which for years I've wondered why we don't run more of our infrastructure off natural gas, our vehicles, because we can just tell the rest of the world to pound sand.
I absolutely agree. So we got the midterms coming up. That's going to be a part of the calculus on what's going to happen, I think, because that's a variable that we cannot steer away from. It's important, and we need to keep an eye on it. And I think you will watch and see more saber rattling as we go through this thing. Now, cybersecurity is one of the big concerns, and I think it plays into what Dr. Fuller was saying earlier when he was saying, Russia's economy is similar to South Korea. It's 1/10 the size of the U.S. Man, what are we talking about here? 145 million people, and we're gonna talk to some of that later on in the show. But cybersecurity is one of those things that has to play into this calculus as well. And this is a quote here: "If Russia does indeed go into the Donbas region and wave a flag, the United States has already promised a series of reprisals." And this is coming from the CEO of cybersecurity firm Ergo.
Mhm.
And he says, so what's Russia's next move? It's very likely to increase cyber attacks. It's an easy move for them, he added. That
Mhm.
means the United States and U.S. private companies need to be taking this very seriously. He went on to say, and this is an interesting quote here, "We are already in a warfare state right now, and we need to be aware of that." And I think this is
Yep.
so important. People need to understand what is, and I pose this question to you, what does a cyber Pearl Harbor look like? Does anybody know? Does
It's
any, you know?
it makes the real Pearl Harbor look like a grain of sand on a beach, in my opinion. Not to diminish what happened in Pearl Harbor, obviously, but I mean, Pearl Harbor. A lot of people died, catastrophic for that spot of the world, right?
Mhm.
Cyber attack, you can affect the whole country real fast. I mean, that's just holy cow, dude. That could get out of hand incredibly fast. And there's a lot of articles out there. That's how Russia will also deter other countries like the United States from getting too involved in this, is start messing around domestically through a cyber attack.
And that's exactly what I'm getting at. When would we say that the Russian hackers had crossed some sort of red line that leads us into a hot war? And nobody knows where that is. And Eddie, who's the gentleman I'm quoting here, he pointed out that in 2017, the Russian malware attack on critical Ukrainian sectors, including their power grid, businesses, and government agencies, started as just one component of their attack. But what it did was this, of course, it's a malware attack, and the law of
Mhm.
unintended consequences are always at play. So something that was just designed to infiltrate computer systems through a popular Ukrainian piece of accounting software actually spread far beyond the Ukraine, causing incredible damage. Even probably the most consequential damage to America was that it attacked uh, Mondelez International, which is the company that makes Oreos, Triscuits, and some other snack foods. But it infected their computers and cost them millions and millions of dollars worth of damages and
Mhm.
disrupted their supplies. So right now, at a time in which, as you pointed out, we have like what 6 days of chips here in
Mhm.
most countries, most
Yep.
of our country, a little bit of attack like that that slows down and cripples our already weakened supply chain could be horrific.
Yep. And I'll tell you what, the mess with my Oreos, shit's gonna get serious. Yep. It's time to go. But seriously, yeah, you bring it up, Rich, and I'll bring it up next week on connecting the dots as well. In the past, we've had a 40-day supply of semiconductors in the country on average. We're down to a 5-day supply now. So a cyber attack, say on maybe a port's logistics system, I mean, there you go. You're talking about chaos. You think you got supply chain problems now? Just wait.
Exactly, exactly. And again, it's like, uh, what is it? Dr. Fuller says an attack on Oreos is an attack on us all.
Yeah.
Bob says Oreos that crossed the line with me.
See, I'm
Yeah,
telling you, dude, that's where it's at. You
that's
mess with
it.
the Oreos, that's it. We can debate whether you peel it off or whether you dunk the whole thing. We can have debates about that, but we can all agree on Oreos.
But what we cannot debate is the seriousness of that attack.
That's right.
But I mean, in all seriousness, though, I mean, one day it's Oreos and we laugh, and the next day it's our power grid, which is
Hmm.
already fragile
For
because
sure.
it's ancient.
Or
And
our water supply, right?
yeah, exactly. And here again, it's one of those things, and I know Bob will know what I'm talking about because he told me to read Ted Koppel's amazing book, Lights Out. Please read that about the fragility of our
Hmm.
electrical grid. And where do we get these large power transformers? We get them from China, and they take
Hmm.
about a year and a half to make. And then, oh, by the way, how do you get them over here? So an attack on our electrical grid would be, again, it could take us back to the dark ages.
Yeah.
Let's see here. See, Jay Douglas says an interesting article posted on Police One this past weekend highlights cyber attacks on 9/11 call centers, public safety agencies, local governments, and medical facilities. This past Saturday, there were at there were at least 16 attacks on such entities in just one day. I have a feeling that these
Wow.
attacks will increase exponentially.
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah, you want to make sure the United States doesn't get involved internationally, cause so many domestic problems that we're too distracted to do much overseas.
Yes, exactly. And a international firm that tracks cybersecurity, they said the U.S. has dropped from its previous ranking of fifth most cyber secure country to the 17th most cyber secure country on the planet. So we're losing ground every single day. And
Mhm.
if you look at the top 3 or 4 in years past, it's the U.S., it's Russia, it's China. Estonia has really come a long way, as well
Mhm.
as the UK. So
So let's think about name those countries off again, Rich.
the US, China, Russia, Estonia, for some reason, the UK.
And those are
On
the
the
ones that have gotten a lot better or a lot worse.
No, they have been the top for a while.
Okay. So did you say which countries are doing the best with this?
Uh, well, Russia and China
Right.
are
So
some of the
they're the
top.
ones doing most of the troll activity, most of these
Yes.
cyber attacks, but they're making sure their own fences are well mended, aren't they?
Well, it goes
So
back to, yeah, go ahead.
yeah.
I'm sorry. Let you
So I was
finish your
just saying
thought.
they're getting out in front of the curve. They know where the battlefield's going. So first thing they're doing is preparing their defenses and then projecting power, knowing it'll be very difficult for anybody to strike back because they've got their defenses in good order.
Yeah, so it's one of those things, and I'll get to it later. I'm excited to talk about it, but I'm going to save it toward the end because it really is the
Okay.
final thing here.
Okay.
I also want to talk about one of the things that Biden was initially talking about was and he only said this one time, and I think somebody finally read him in on the script. He's like, I'm going to stop Russia's ability to convert the dollar because he assumed that Russia was still holding dollars. Guess what? June of 2021, Russia removed the US dollar from its roughly $200 billion national wealth fund. And it was removed because the US continues to levy sanctions. So it wanted to make sure that America did not have that ability to hang it over their head. So now they put that money from their national wealth fund into 40% euros. Chinese yuan makes up 30% and gold at 20%. Meanwhile, the Japanese yen and the British pound will round out about the other 5%. So, and again, economists have been saying Russia's preparing for something.
Mm-hmm.
They were saying this in
Yep.
June of last year, Will.
Yeah.
Why did they dump the dollar and buy up everything else? And oh, by the way, since 2014, since they went into Crimea, Russia has been buying up gold. They bought 8% more gold when compared to previous years. So again, they were getting ready.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So again, this is the benefit of not having an election cycle. They can make long-term plans and do these sorts of things. And as they prepare for this, it not just prepares them, but it's the double-edged sword because it also weakens us. Because as soon as they're out of the dollar, now how do our sanctions? Oh, you can't access the SWIFT system that does international trade through US dollars. And they go, I don't care.
Yeah, and let's talk about that because that I read an article and it's all in the references today. It says that is Biden's nuclear option.
Mm-hmm.
The nuclear option does not mean a nuclear weapon. What he means by that, or what economists mean by that, is he's going to move them off of the SWIFT system.
Mm-hmm.
And the SWIFT system is really nothing more than a secure communication platform used by banks and brokerages that allow giant financial institutions like countries to move money and as well as information quickly. What's interesting about that is I read that Russia's going to be fine because they've been building its own for years now. It won't move as quickly as the SWIFT system, but it's going to be just fine. And the other thing is the only other country that's ever been taken off of SWIFT was Iran. Now, SWIFT is based in Belgium. So the Belgian government and other countries that have stakeholders in SWIFT will have to have a say. So it's not like America can flick a switch and shut Russia off. They do have to go to Belgium and get them to agree with it.
Yep.
But even if they did, even if that's your nuclear option, Russia's going to be like, yeah, okay, no big deal, pal. I don't have any of your damn dollars anyway.
So I'm going to make up a couple of numbers here, for example, because I don't know how long it takes. But let's just say through the SWIFT system, transfer everything to US dollars. A large international trade takes 3 days to process the payment all the way through from buyer to the seller. Let's just say it's 3 days. So now let's say their slower system takes 5 days, but they have autonomy. They
Yeah.
don't have to say, Mother, may I. I'll
Mhm.
tell you what, as a business owner, I would take that 10 times every week and twice on Sunday. No
Exactly.
two
Yeah.
ways about it, because I'll take that autonomy every single time. Because now I don't have to go say, Mother, may I to the United States at the UN. Just do what you want.
Well, it's
And
like
China and Russia have already agreed to bilateral trade in their own currencies. That's already
exactly.
out there. So
It's already out
the dollar is losing its power in more ways than just through inflation.
Exactly. And that's why I circle back to the beginning of this, where it's like, well, Americans going to have to pay higher prices at the pump if they invest. It's like, no, guys, this has a giant ripple effect
Mhm.
into everything. Alan Kelly says, what if Russia does a military incursion into the Ukraine? What might China do at the same time regarding Taiwan and cause additional worldwide problems? Bingo. And we're going to talk about that at the end of the show.
Yep.
Please like and hit that share button, because I think America needs to wake up to some of this. So
Yep.
let's talk about China, since that's what Ellen's point is. China, so far, man, has thrown its political weight behind Russia.
Mhm.
They said that, quote, to the Americas, said they have legitimate security concerns. America, you need to listen to what Moscow is asking for, because China sees it as legitimate.
Mhm.
And they even went as far as to say you need to take them very seriously. But what's interesting about the Chinese foreign minister, he in all of this speech, he also said, quote, the most urgent priority right now is that the U.S. should stop interfering with the Beijing Winter Olympics.
Yeah.
Wow.
But again, they're just distracting from the real issues, right?
They are.
Now,
But
one of the things that people are worried about, because China's zero COVID policy,
Mhm.
is they're worried that there may be athletes from certain countries, like say maybe the United States, that they were exposed, so now we're gonna hold them here for an extra 14 days after the games are over to make sure they don't spread COVID on the way out of the country. You think that would cause a media uproar and maybe distract people from goings on in other parts?
That's exactly right. That's a great point. This foreign minister of China, Wang, he also said that, Washington must also, quote, stop playing with fire on the issue of Taiwan. So there was a lot of warnings in that China not only is siding with Russia, but they're also throwing out warnings to the U.S. over their policy on Taiwan, because I think they
Mhm.
see them as interconnected. And of course, China borders with Russia, and
Mhm.
they have a soft spot for former socialist countries.
Sure.
And so that's two boxes that
Mhm.
old Vlad ticks off automatically.
Yep.
And of course, China is also closely, like I think Alan's point is, China is closely watching what NATO and America is going to do to a Russian invasion. And one of the concerns that I have is there could be like taking slivers of the pie. If they
Mhm.
take just run in and they took Crimea in 2014, let's say they take the Donbas region of the Ukraine. There's two slivers. It might make China go, maybe I'll just take one of the Taiwanese islands and
Yep.
test the waters and see what happens.
Yep. Yep. Incrementalism, right? Just
Yes.
improve your position a little bit every day, and that they're going to have it. And we have the same problem with Russia and Ukraine and China and Taiwan, in that it takes us, the United States, so long to respond to that region because of where it's located. They're already hugely in front of the curve on every aspect of the battlefield.
That's exactly right. Look at that. That's another perfect segue. You're on it this morning, man.
I'm trying to up my game for you, brother.
And that is, I want to talk about, so that's China, the Winter Olympics. Of course, we have a diplomatic boycott of the Winter Olympic Games in China. But what does that mean? It doesn't mean squat. It just means we're not going to send an official, political delegation, but our
Yeah.
athletes are still going to compete. So really, it's a nothing burger
Mm-hmm.
for as far as Beijing is concerned. Well, let's talk about the terrain in the Ukraine, the proximity to Russia, as well as the timing. And one of the reasons why I wanted to do this show is because if there's going to be a move, it's probably going to come in February. And there's several reasons for that. The ground will still be frozen, which will allow easy travel for heavy mechanized vehicle. If you wait till March, April, and you get into the spring, it's going to be a muddy
Mm.
mess. Rain and mud could make it difficult. Bridges are going to be
Right.
difficult in the Ukraine because they're old bridges for tanks to traverse,
Okay.
and they're not mech friendly. So, but the rolling terrain is perfect for tanks to roll swiftly across. So the timing is appropriate. Another thing is, analyst says, well, yeah, I mean, if Vladimir Putin's going to go in, he's going to have to do it before, because he would never do it while he's sitting there with Xi Jinping in Beijing enjoying the Olympics. And I say, bull crap.
Yeah.
If I'm Putin, if everybody said I won't do it, then that's
Yeah.
exactly when I'm going to do it.
Absolutely.
Another thing that to consider is,
Well, one second, Rich. I'm sorry. Let's back up a little bit. You know, we talked about Pearl Harbor earlier. Wasn't it just a couple days before the Japanese Prime Minister was in D.C., right before the attacks on Pearl Harbor? My history is failing me a little bit, but it was not much longer before Pearl Harbor happened.
that's exactly right. They were having meetings with Cordell Hull, who was a Secretary of State, trying to figure out, because the Japanese had invaded certain islands to try to get the oil,
Yeah.
and America was trying to twist their arm, saying, "Look, we'll cut off your supplies of oil unless you pull out." And of course, they went, "Yeah, okay."
Yeah. So he had to have known what was. I mean, they didn't just decide to invade or bomb Pearl Harbor overnight. So he knew those plans were in place, and he's still sitting there going, "Oh yes, let's talk."
Exactly. Let's talk about citizenship, because this is another one of those interesting variables that are at play here. One of the regional military commanders said, quote, "If Russian citizens residing in the territories," meaning Ukraine, "want to join the Russian armed forces, we will register and draft them." And he also told them that so far Russia has granted passports to more than 500,000 people in rebel-held areas. 500,000 people in that part of the Ukraine, Donbass region, are now Russian passport holders. So why am I telling you this? Who gives a crap? Well, to me, it's the same thing that Hitler did in the Sudetenland in Czechoslovakia. That's one of the reasons why he rolled into Czechoslovakia. He's like, "Hey, man, I got to do something about these German citizens here, man.
Yeah. Just looking out for my people.
I'm just looking out for my people. So
yeah.
I got to go in there and take care of them." So no wonder he wants to chuck out passports like it's cool. It strengthens his position that I have to do something about my citizens over there.
I also find the wording interesting here: rebel-held territories, not a sovereign country.
Oh,
a rebel-held territory. So in other words, they rebel. They're not really their own. They're really Russian.
And it gives
them. They get a bunch of passports to prove it.
That's exactly right. It gives him a stronger position to say, "Look, man, these people want to be Russians," because that's exactly what happened in Crimea. As soon as he started rolling in, they say, "We want to break away and we need Russia to annex us."
Yeah.
And they did.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about, this is another concern I have, and that is false flag operations.
Mm-hmm.
Former FSB agent Alexandria Litvinchenko, who accused he accused Vladimir Putin. Now, again, I know I'm going to butcher this guy's name, Litvinenko. He had been a lieutenant colonel in the FSB, and he knew for a fact that in 1999, the Russian apartment bombings that Putin said were carried out by Chechens and killed over 300 Russian citizens I believe in and around Moscow. So Putin saying that this has been carried out by these Chechen rebels. In reality, Litvinenko said, no. Putin did this, and it helped Putin climb to power, because at the time he was just head of the FSB, but he goes head of the FSB and then takes over from Yeltsin. So this is one of those things that Putin has done before, false flag operations. It's the same thing. I think it was Operation Himmler that Hitler did to invade, as a pretext to invade Poland. He said, "Look, the Poles are attacking these German citizens living in Poland. I've got to go in and do something." So I think this is something that we have to think could happen.
Well, and there's already claims in mainstream media that Russian spec ops are on the Ukraine side of the border, launching rounds over at the Russian side of the lines.
I have heard that. And again, small arms is one thing, man. If they started doing something like bombings and things of that
Mhm.
nature, I think he could spill across that border quick and have a good pretext to do it. Like, look, 500,000 passport holders, you guys are bombing my citizens. I've got to go in and
Mhm.
do something. And of course, what did Alexander Litvinenko, this former FSB agent who accused Putin of it, what happened to him, folks? Well, he was living a quiet life in England under an assumed name when someone poisoned him with polonium-210
Mhm.
and killed him in a matter of days back in 2006. That's weird.
Yeah.
Right after he met with
Just,
two former Soviets.
it's a coincidence, Rich. I mean, the polonium-210, I mean, I almost grabbed that instead of the salt this morning for my eggs. I mean, it can happen.
And what's funny is I was preparing for this. I was going down the rabbit hole of that stuff, and what's interesting about that and why they chose that is it has really like no gamma ray signature, so you can be carrying it, and normal detectors won't even pick it up. But it's a crazy lethal, and I think they gave him like a dose that was 5 times it was more than enough to do it. And a matter of fact, they had tried to kill him several times over the preceding days, and like as they were moving from hotel to hotel. And of course, Scotland Yard solved all this after the guy's death, and they saw the radiation signatures of where it was left in hotel rooms, and they were flushing this stuff down the toilet. I mean, it's crazy, man.
Yeah.
Putin wanted this guy bad, and he got him.
It's crazy. I mean, just as a guy who grew up in the Midwest, been around the world a little bit, all that sort of stuff. I mean, this is like something out of a movie.
It is
It
out of a
really is.
movie.
I mean, it's crazy. And
Because
yeah, go ahead. Sorry, bro.
Putin is a former FSB agent. He was the head of that, climbed the ranks, and so he knows what he's doing, and he's calculated. And I'm telling you, from the weakness that he saw in Afghanistan, he's been, and Obama did nothing over Crimea. He
Yep.
weathered a little bit of sanctions, and he's sitting there going, I'm going to take it. Because if you look back in 2008, and I don't have this in the notes, but in 2008, Putin wrote a position paper, just a blog post. And one of the things that he said was, I'm going to misquote it here, but it's something like the greatest crime or the greatest tragedy of the 20th century was the disillusionment of the USSR. So not the death of the murder of 6 million Jews in the death camps, or not Stalin's murderous famine, but it was the dissolution of the Soviet Union. He's trying to put the band back together, man.
Yeah, he is. And let's think back to when you brought those economic sanctions back then. Let's think about what Putin has done since then to make sure those sanctions won't have any real teeth behind them next time. Bilateral trade, got rid of his US dollars, stocked up on gold, strengthened his military dramatically, and has a stranglehold on Europe through his energy.
Exactly.
So,
So
what are we going to sanction?
it's very strategic. It's not tactical, it's strategic.
Mm-hmm.
And he has really strengthened his ties with China. So a lot of we here in America, we take, I think, less than 1% of our imports are from Russia.
Mm-hmm.
But Russia imports a lot from the Europe and others. But these are things that can be easily replaced with his chummy relationship with Beijing.
Yep.
And of course, Beijing, China is going to want Russia to be friendly to it when it starts seizing and slicing off pieces of Taiwan. So it's an interesting move, and it's far beyond just paying a few more pennies at the pump.
Absolutely.
Let's talk about false dichotomies, because this is kind of where I want to wrap up with, and it has something to do with what Dr. Fuller said, and he's absolutely right. The U.S. population dwarfs that of Russia's 145 million. Here we got about 340 million, give or take, legal aliens. And their economy is a tenth the size of the United States. So what's the point here, Rich? And I would say it's this. In 1937, Germany had a population of about 69 million. And then 1938, they annexed Austria and gained almost 7 million more people. Also in 1938, Germany took as I spoke about earlier, the Sudetenland of parts of Czechoslovakia, and then said, you know what, screw it. In March 1939, let's go ahead and take all of Czechoslovakia and add another 4 million people. So that by 1939, the British Empire had over 550 million people in it. And that's the entire British Empire all around the world, right? If you take all those people, but that's a quarter of the Earth's population fell under the Union Jack. whereas Germany had 3.8% of the world's population and was able to drive them into the sea at Dunkirk.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that there's some risk of a false dichotomy here, including the one that I'm presenting. I think that you could easily say, well, Rich, you're presenting a false dichotomy too. Okay, fair enough. I will take that. But it's something to consider when people say, well, what can he do? Well, look what Germany was able to do by piecemealing it. And at the time that Germany, at the time when Hitler took Belgium, the Netherlands, Luxembourg, France, in only 6 weeks in May of 1940, it was able to capture 86.7 million people. I'm sorry, Germany, a country of 86 million people, defeated 212 million people in just 6 weeks. I'm sorry for that misquote. So let's take economy and population and put it aside. Russia has 6,255 strategic nuclear warheads. 6,255 strategic nuclear warheads. America has 5,550. So they have 1,000 more, basically, warheads that we have. And of those, Russia and the U.S. have about 1,600 of them that are actively deployed. And if you look at, so that's nuclear weapons. Let's look at nuclear submarines. The United States has 71 that can park nukes off the coast of anywhere. Russia has 33. United Kingdom has 11. When we look at Air Force, as far as the United States has 3,318 and Russia has 1,900. So I think if Putin was, hanging out at the Kremlin wearing a stained bathrobe, eating chicken wings, he still has enough nukes at his disposal to threaten the stability of the world. And that's something that we have to be aware of, aside from, he's got a small, weak economy. We're going to do this. This guy still has his finger on the button of a tremendous, power.
Yep.
And we can't just lap this guy off, I think.
Absolutely. And, as you're quoting off those numbers from Germany, what just kept going through my head over and over again was speed, surprise, violence of action.
That's exactly right.
It's not just about the numbers. It's look going back to your example in Afghanistan. Look what 60,000 Taliban did against the United States of America.
Yeah, they won. The strongest country that's ever been, the sole superpower left on the planet, and we got our ass kicked by 60 to 75,000 Taliban in a matter of days.
Yep. But why? It wasn't, it was because we were trying to fight a civilized war. We were trying to be reasonable. We were trying to be fill in the blank. Nobody wants to be the street brawler, except, the Taliban and the Russians, they're happy to do a street brawl, right?
But I don't think we have the will for it.
Exactly. And I think that's really where it comes back to more than the numbers. I mean, go back to the Civil War. Not the Civil War, the Revolutionary War. Great. I mean, the UK, they were the powerhouse of the world. Look what a bunch of ragtag Americans did.
Exactly. Exactly. Because they're trying to fight it across the ocean, and again, this is their Russian
They're trying
backyard.
to fight it across the ocean, and they were trying to fight it by the old rules where you stand across the battlefield and shoot each other. And we were doing cowardly things like hiding behind trees and rocks, right?
Exactly.
Now, which side are we on?
Yeah, and Bob's point is incredibly well made. He says, I think the answer to what can he do is whatever he wants, as long as no one is willing to stand up and stop him.
Yep.
Which is why I wanted to talk about the idea that, well, do we stop him just to save a few pennies at the pump? Well, no, hell no. That's not a reason to stop him. But when you put the aggregate of all these things together, I think it leads to a bigger problem than we're maybe willing to contend with.
Yep.
And he does have a lot of power beyond just, an economy. Yep. And if you look at all the things that he's been doing in preparing for this move, it puts it all into really interesting context. He prepares the battle space, right? He gets his people into position. He gets himself off the dollar. He makes all these moves like, I'm ready. But it also could be a gross miscalculation on his part. Maybe he didn't think America would have the resolve to do something about it.
You think maybe he might have affected an election in some way to make sure a certain leader was in place?
Well, again, we know he's been meddling in our elections
Yeah.
for a long freaking time.
Yeah.
He gets a weak leader installed, maybe, potentially. I don't know.
Yeah.
And then here we go.
Yeah. Or at least influenced it. I'm not saying the
Influence.
Russians can, install a leader in the
No.
United States, but the same way, we under Obama, we messed with Israel's election because he didn't like Netanyahu. So, it happens. It happens all across the world. Every country does it.
This
I'm
is
not
what
saying,
this is
but
what
this
countries
is
do.
right. And that's the great game, right? But
Yeah.
people take too much on face value with that, I believe.
Yeah, there's been plenty of stories, and I've even heard some of them. And while I was on active duty in the Marine Corps, like, hey, man, these guys will show up with sea bags full of money and say, you're going to vote, your town's going to vote this way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Johnny
And
King says, and they do. Johnny King says the mind of Putin is more dangerous than his bank account or reserves. Yeah. Jeff says the Ukrainian military is made up of a huge number of conscripted personnel. One just turned on his fellow service members. Wow.
Yeah.
So it's something that I wanted to talk about this morning. We've been on for an hour and 10 minutes, and that's kind of really the majority of what I wanted to say about it. I think we need to definitely keep an eye on this. If it's going to go, it could go swiftly. Even if it's if it's not a full scale invasion of the Ukraine, he just takes the sliver that has 500,000 Russian passports holders in it. And goes, look, I had to.
Yep. And there's I as I'm sitting here thinking about it over the last week or so since you and I kind of got on this, I think we'll know it's imminent if we start hearing about cyber attacks, whether that be in Europe, here in the US, or both. I think that's when we'll know it's imminent, an attack is imminent. A couple of things I'm doing is, keep plenty of gas in your vehicle because those prices are going to jump up and maybe supply problems. We don't know. So going back to our self-defense, what can we do with this information? My house here is on LP. This is not the time of year to buy LP based on price. And I'm going to call today and get my LP tank filled.
Yeah, exactly. Bob says he can win either way. If he invades, he gets a resource-rich country, grow through acquisition. Instead, if he gets us to give him something big, like a guarantee that the Ukraine won't be in NATO, he wins. Yep. Exactly. He's set himself up incredibly well.
Yep.
Anything else before we get into the video that we had for the end of the show?
No, just reiterate a preview for next week. I'm going to take next week's and we're going to connect some dots between all of these things, and I'll preview where we think we're going after that, unless a different emerging threat pops out, which will be Africa.
Yeah. All right, ready, brother? Let's do this. We got a video for you guys. Here we go. Let's see. Let me turn on the volume here. Volume seems to be muted. I'll unmute that. Live TV, pal.
Yep.
Let's see, Will. That's not working.
Huh. I don't know. Maybe there wasn't audio on that.
I don't know. It's grayed out. It's not letting me give you the audio.
Oh, weird.
Poop. Let me see if I can remove it and then restart it.
Okay. So while you're doing that, I'll give a little background on this video. The guy in the suit's a lawyer. The guy with the gun is a former client who apparently the lawyer ticked off. I can't remember the details of it, how the lawyer went about ticking this guy off.
Yeah, still grayed out, Will.
Okay. But he so he's using that tree as cover. As you can see, there isn't a whole lot of cover there. But what I got out of this video was this lawyer was shot numerous times, but you can't even tell. Obviously huge adrenaline dump going on. But he keeps moving. He's staying in the fight. And
he survived. There's another angle right there.
Yep. Look, he's just walking out. So my point to all the warriors out there is he got shot numerous times. And this is I'll be disparaging some pencil neck lawyer, right? He just kept moving, kept going. You're always in the
Kept
fight,
using
brothers.
that cover. Kept
You're
using that
always
cover
in.
and working the angles.
Working the angles, kept going back and forth, doing what he could with what he had.
There he is, survivor.
Yep.
Jesus. Well, food for thought there.
Yep. So, you know, I like showing that video to people just to go, you know, you're never out. Keep going. And just keep moving, keep doing what you can with that, with whatever you have, work those angles, like you say, and he survived. And that's point blank from, I'm assuming, a 38 snubby. So Bob asked, so what's the best round for lawyers? I will, I will let you each decide that for yourselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't see, we have a member who's a lawyer who's normally on here, John. I guess he's not on this morning. He's chime in.
So, you know, and whether it's a lawyer or whoever, doesn't really matter. The point is, this guy used what he had. I'm betting this was an ambush attack. I mean, they wound up literally out in the landscaping there. So just keep moving, stay in the fight, guys. And
That's
you're
exactly
never
right.
out, never out.
Never out of the fight. And I hope you guys enjoyed today's show and all these emerging threat shows. You know, if you look at the show notes, you'll see, like I said, dozens of links. This show took, I don't know, a couple of days to kind of sift through Reuters, Al Jazeera, CNN, NBC, BBC, Fox. I mean, I went everywhere trying to find information and piece it together in a way that hopefully people can make sense of what's going on. Because if you just watch our mainstream media, it's just going to cost Americans pennies at the pump.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, big deal.
Get ready. I mean, I know we're already hit by inflation, so we're going to get a little bit more if they take the Ukraine. Well, it's more than that. And I would, if anybody's listening out there in the national security apparatus, we need to figure out where that red line is for a cyber attack. We need to nail that down. We need to shore up our cyber defenses, because you could have a nation state, or even just a couple of really smart guys with a laptop and an internet connection that could bring this country down. So we have to take our cyber more seriously. We're moving beyond bullets and Band-Aids into things that can really bring our country back to the damn Stone Age. And any parting comments, Will?
You know, you bring up the red line for the cyber side, and I'm not a big computer guy, but I'm trying, just as you said, I'm trying to figure out how would we even do that? Because, you know, between, you know, you can have a Russian actor, but he's in France, he's in Germany when he does whatever he does, right? So how do we ever trace that back to, well, it was actually a Russian attack? And I don't know the answer to that. So it gives, the cyber attacks gives plausible deniability. When an airplane flies over someplace and drops a bomb, you can track the airplane back to wherever it came from. You know, with the cyber attack, I don't know how we get that red line, but I'm by no means an expert in that area. I'm just, is that plausible deniability?
Well, and you know, one other thing we didn't talk about, as far as like, you know, a Russian actor with a laptop that goes into France and starts doing stuff, you know, it's a good point. I mean, who's doing what to who? And that reminds me, you know, hey, Russia just showed up one day in Syria, right across the river from the U.S. troops, and like, hey, I guess the Russians are here now. Didn't see that coming. Why are they here? So Putin is pushing his influence, and we definitely need to pay attention to what's going on. Thank you to everybody that joined us this morning. Hopefully we've given you something to think about, and maybe give you something to continue your reading as we move through this. And if there are no final comments, Will, I guess you can take us out.
All right, guys, the fight's coming. Be ready.